A pleasant afternoon and welcome to Working for You. I am Lesroy Williams. Thank you very much for joining us for our program today. Of course, your company is well appreciated from week to week. Today we are going to be having a very lively discussion on the most current topic of our day. Very topical, and that is the COVID-19 pandemic, or the coronavirus pandemic, that has brought untold suffering to the world. It has killed over 3 million people and continues to kill people each day. We only have to look to, most recently, India. India is experiencing the COVID-19 pandemic like no other country at this present time, with rapid transmission, with thousands dead daily. And it is a lesson for all of us that the pandemic is still with us, and that there are lessons that we still have to learn, that no place is safe until all places are safe. And so therefore it is a global effort. It is a global challenge. And at present we have the vaccine. There are several of them that are intended to help with this pandemic. In 1918, they had the Spanish influenza. Not that it started in Spain. It never started in Spain. But the reason why it's called the Spanish influenza is because Spain is the one that did not really try to hide it. The others really tried to hide it because it was during World War I, and they thought that it would reduce the morale of the soldiers and so on. Of course, it was the soldiers that actually spread the Spanish flu, which is H1N1 flu, from the United States, where it actually started. It started in the United States. Now, it killed, the Spanish influenza killed, some people say, an estimated 25 million. Other researchers say it could be between 40 and 50 million. However, the point is that it killed millions. That was in 1918. 100 years later, we are now dealing with the COVID-19 pandemic. We have learned a lot since 1918. Science and technology have come a very long way. And all it requires is for us to do what we have to do in order to mitigate against the continuing deaths and suffering and infections that this disease has caused. Today I have in the studio young, bright, and well listened to Dr. Cuthbert Sebastian Jr., who is going to be talking to us about the COVID-19 pandemic. Dr. Cuthbert, welcome.
Thank you for having me here. It's an honor to be on Working for You. I've listened to the show several times and I've enjoyed it. So I'm here to speak about the COVID-19 pandemic and everything about it. That includes whether it is social distancing, the coronavirus itself, or the vaccinations that we have on board, not even just here in St. Kitts, but globally, so individuals can have a better understanding as to what's going on in the world regarding the vaccine or COVID-19 specifically.
Right. Now, Dr. Sebastian, I'm going to start with a very basic question.
Yes.
What is a vaccine? Because vaccine is something that is in our vocabulary.
Yes.
It is something that is not alien to us. Let's put it that way, because most of us, if not all of us, in St. Kitts and Nevis have been vaccinated.
Yes.
We're vaccinated as babies and so on. Up until 2015, until now, I've had 3 vaccines. I've had the yellow fever vaccine, I've had the hepatitis B vaccine, which came in 3 doses,
Yes.
and I've had a booster, a tetanus booster. So what is a vaccine?
Okay, so a vaccine is a method that we use to boost our natural defenses against a specific disease. So what they do is they take either a virus or a bacteria or a pathogen and take either a part of it or the whole thing, and they administer it into the body so your body sees it, and then it can build up a natural defense against it. But what they do is they weaken it or kill it, or it's a harmless part of it where it doesn't cause an infection. So that's what a vaccine does. So it's seen as a preventative measure to get the actual disease. I know some individuals say, but you can still catch, let's say in this case, coronavirus, you can still catch it. But no vaccine is proven to be 100% effective. None in existence. Not these COVID-19 vaccines, not the ones that we've seen throughout the past. But using some examples from the past, we no longer have to deal with polio anymore, where that used to be rampaging through the world, where we had hospitals dedicated just for this disease at one point in time.
Right.
So the vaccines do work. They just work over a time period, because
Yes.
it needs enough people to take it for it to actually be effective, and so we can actually see a change in the world.
Right. Now, never before, Dr. Sebastian, have we questioned, or people questioned,
Yeah.
a vaccine. Before we took vaccines, and I know they've always had the anti-vaxxers,
Yes.
but never before have we really questioned, should I take it? Should I not take it? We're seeing levels of vaccine hesitancy.
Yes.
People wondering whether to take it, whether not to take it, and saying that, it was produced in such a short space of time.
Yes.
Which is unusual, because vaccines take, from what I understand, the last vaccine took about 5 years
Yes.
to be developed. And people are questioning that and saying, well, look, enough trials have not been done to prove the effectiveness of these vaccines. Can you explain to us the process of getting to the acceptance of a vaccine, and also what is responsible, why they were able to come up with this vaccine in such a short space of time?
Okay, so, well, for one, to actually create a vaccine itself, it doesn't take that long of a time. It can literally take a few weeks to a few months to actually create the vaccine. But to the actual approval process would take some time, regarding whether they have enough money to fund the research, to begin the research on the vaccine. That
Right.
is a whole topic unto itself. So usually a body or a scientific body would invent, let's say, a vaccine, and then they would carry it out through clinical trials. 3 phases of clinical trials, where they test the vaccine for safety. They test it to see if it's actually doing what it's supposed to do, whether it works, and they will test that in first a few humans, and then, no, first they'll test it in the lab, then a few humans, and then the large bodies of humans, tens of thousands of people, to see if it's safe and effective and it's actually working. And this is how they go about doing that. the vaccines, all these coronavirus vaccines have been tested on these tens of thousands of people. They have gone through the trials, and they have proven from the trials that they are safe and effective based on the trials. And the trials should pick up all of the side effects. Of course, when you go out to the general population where there's millions and millions and millions of people, then it's a possibility that you can run into something that is very rare. Okay? It's a possibility. So far, I've heard there have been talks of blood clots. So now they're looking at the possible link between the AstraZeneca and the blood clot. They haven't found the link. There are a few theories as to what the link could possibly be, but they haven't found the link in a concrete manner. And then it also goes to say that there are other reasons these individuals may have gotten blood clots. And one of the theories is that they have possibly been exposed to COVID-19 before, because COVID-19 actually increases your risk for blood clots at a much higher rate than they're proposing that these vaccines do. So you are more likely to get a blood clot from COVID-19 infection than you would have from getting any vaccine. And they still haven't found a link between the vaccine and blood clots. So they always say the benefit of the vaccine always outweigh the risk regarding that.
Right. We have another pandemic, and it's the pandemic of misinformation and disinformation. Now, they're not the same thing. We tend to use those two words interchangeably, but disinformation basically is false information with the intention of creating harm or hurting a person, a group, an organization, a country, whatever, while misinformation is false information that does not have that intent of creating harm. Now, that misinformation and disinformation have contributed to a lot of the vaccine hesitancy that we are seeing. And I said it's a pandemic because this global disinformation, misinformation that have been heightened and exacerbated all because of social media. And of course, that you're young, and the young people, that is what they're into. They're into a lot of social media. And that is all they pick up. What is being sent to them on their WhatsApp, what they see on Facebook, and so on. But this channel is being used to spread a lot of misinformation about the vaccine. What would you have to say to people in terms of this disinformation, misinformation, and what they're feeding into and feeding off that has created this vaccine hesitancy?
Okay, well, regarding all the information people are receiving, whether it is disinformation, whether it's misinformation, whether it's the right information, I know there is a lot of information coming your way. Even I feel overwhelmed by the amount of information coming my way. And I always try to align myself with sources that I know are reliable. And I always, even if I think the source is reliable, I always back check with another reliable source that I know. And this is a way that I can kind of weed out misinformation and disinformation. I can speak to an example where there was a news headline, I believe from CNN, speaking about what the CDC had stated. I can't remember the exact details, but when I went to the CDC's website, there was no information about what CNN was saying. So you have to be careful, even with the reputable sources that you may come across, that there may be some disinformation or misinformation on them. So it's always good to back check. And you have to remember, social media, for example, anyone can post anything on social media. I mean, my nephew, who is 8 years old, he has a YouTube page and he posts whatever he wants. So anyone can post anything they want to on social media, and they can do a lot of damage with that. I don't think the world has had this much attention on one thing for so long. So it's really hard to weed out the misinformation and disinformation. So what I advise people to do, I usually tell them to go to the World Health Organization as a good source of information. Reason being is it's a non-biased source of information. It's not for any one country. It's an organization just focused on health. And I think that is the most important topic of the day, especially in the times of the pandemic, is health. And that's where I advise people to go to. There's also CARFA. They're going to give some good information as well. Unfortunately, I can't offer people to go to science-oriented websites, because that type of information may be misinterpreted or understood if you're not trained to understand it. But those would be the two websites I would recommend individuals to go and, look for themselves, see what's going on. And then obviously we have our own body of health here in St. Kitts, the Ministry of Health, and that's another source that you can look to that's homegrown.
Yes. No, I think that there has to be, and you're correct, media literacy. Not everyone is media literate. And the whole thing of fact checking, looking at your sources and seeing whether they're credible, looking at the reliability and the validity of information, checking one source against other sources, and so on. So not just looking at one source, but looking across the board at several sources before one can come to a conclusion.
Yes.
But that is not so. And the negativity is having such a rippling effect on our society that I met one person just on Monday who said to me, I'm not going to take the vaccine because, I don't know what it's going to do to my body in 6 years. Well, you've taken a vaccine as a child and you're 50 years now. What has it really done to your body? So...
Well, I mean, I understand their concerns because it's a relatively new vaccine, and anyone will be concerned about something that's new. No one usually wants to be the first person to try anything that's new, especially something going into your body. But the vaccine has been used since last year. And so far, it's been going well regarding the vaccinations. Over 100 million people has been vaccinated with this vaccine. So it's been going very well, and hopefully continues to go well. And based on the science, the vaccine should have no long-term effects, because the vaccine itself does not stay in your body. Your body's immune system destroys the vaccine, and that's what we want to do, stimulate the immune system. And by doing that, you can defend yourself against the actual virus, COVID-19. So that's the good part about the vaccine. We don't foresee any long-term effects because it doesn't have much of a chemical composition to it. It has inactive ingredients there to preserve the active ingredient, which is the adenovirus used to carry the code to produce the COVID-19 proteins, so you can get that immune response to protect yourself. But the vaccine should be safe long-term based on theory.
Okay. Now, the new talk in St. Kitts and Nevis, and I've heard it, multiple times recently, is that, we are waiting on the Cuban vaccine.
Okay.
Because, Cuba is closer to home. It's in the Caribbean. Although they speak a totally different language, Espanol. But people are saying, we will trust the Cuban vaccine.
Okay.
Because, we can easily more identify with Cuba, and Cuba has such a good health system and so on. So I'm waiting on the Cuban vaccine. Where are we with this Cuban vaccine? And is this basically just an excuse?
Well, I'm not sure if it's an excuse. It may be for some people. It may not be. I know individuals who are really waiting on this Cuban vaccine. And I respect Cuba significantly regarding their healthcare system and what they do for healthcare. Currently, I believe they're in phase 3 of the clinical trials. They intend to vaccinate their population first. I think it's around 11 million, if I'm not mistaken. And then I guess afterwards they would offer it to the outside world. The only issue I have with the Cuban vaccine is that it's just not ready yet. Once the trials prove it's safe and effective, I personally have no issue with it. Once it does what it's supposed to do, and if it is available for the people of the Federation to take, then fine. But the only issue I have with it is it's not available yet. And if it's not available yet, that means individuals have a chance to get COVID-19, become positive, and if you're not vaccinated, the virus can more likely replicate and mutate into something that no vaccine works against. So that's the problem. So the longer we wait to vaccinate, we give the virus a chance to replicate and then mutate into something vaccines may not be be effective against, and that's the problem with waiting. So even though I do respect the Cuban vaccine, if it was here today, and it's proven to be effective based on its studies once it's finished it, I would recommend it to anyone once it's available. But it's not here yet. And what the World Health Organization has said, and many scientists have said, and doctors, is that the best vaccine is the one that you have available to you right away. Because it really takes one person to spread it throughout the community, and then we're back to square one. And back to the drawing board.
Yes. No. What immunity do the vaccines provide? What level of immunity, and for how long? Is the jury still out on this?
Okay, so, well, the jury is still out on the length of the immunity. So far, the immunity is there, and I can only see that possibly changing is if the virus mutates into a form where the immunity just doesn't last. That's where I see the problems arising. Regarding how much immunity it is. So I recently saw a study saying that even one shot of the Pfizer or AstraZeneca can get you up to 87%. So even one shot. So the studies are showing comparatively that one shot of either of those can get that. So we're looking at strong immune responses in these vaccines. We just have to be vigilant about these mutations occurring, because these mutations can change all of these numbers that we have right now. So that's why I urge people to take advantage of what we're doing right now. I understand the hesitancy, but sadly the virus isn't going to wait on us. The virus is doing what it's supposed to do. It's trying to survive the best way it knows how, and it's going to try to survive by being able to mutate into a form that avoids these vaccines and our own immune system. Right.
Now, the herd immunity, we hear a lot about that. What is herd immunity? And if we fail to achieve it, what then?
Okay, so herd immunity is when the majority of a population has been vaccinated for a certain disease. In this case, COVID-19. So when majority of the population is vaccinated, it is vaccination. Once you're vaccinated, you're less likely, even if you become positive, you're less likely to spread that disease, because your body would be fighting the infection, and if the infection is being fought by your body, there's only a small amount of it in your body, meaning it has a less likelihood of jumping from your body to somebody else. So that's how it reduces the transmission. So by doing that, if majority of people are vaccinated, it's less likely that the positive people will transmit it to the people who are unvaccinated. Therefore, it would serve as some form of protection for them. Mind you, it's not 100%, because sadly, nothing is 100% when it comes to these things, because things can change, things can evolve, but that's what it does, and it serves to protect the weaker individuals who may not be able to take it for whatever cause, whether it's allergies, or maybe they're too fragile of a person, maybe they're really, really sick, and any sort of insult or kind of stress to the body can push them over the edge, and we don't want to do that. So when I thought of taking the vaccine, I thought about, the loved ones around me. Of course, I had the advantage of reading the research before the general public. So I had a long time to think about it. All through the lockdown and the pandemic, I was following these things, just so I can make an informed decision. So I've tilted back and forth, and then after I got enough information, I feel comfortable with the vaccine. I feel that it's proven to be safe and effective, even in real world practice, especially compared to the damage that the actual virus is doing in countries.
Yeah, and I know that you and we would have had our second dose of the vaccine, and I have had no side effects at all. I had no side effects really with the first dose, and I had no side effects with the second dose. Well, up until now. Up until now, I can say. But who is deemed to be fully vaccinated? And what are the benefits? I think that is what people want to know. What are the benefits of being vaccinated? Because there are those who are saying, oh, I'm vaccinated, but I can still get the virus.
Okay. Well, okay, so someone is deemed to be fully vaccinated 2 weeks after their second dose from the AstraZeneca, and that's because your body requires time to build an immune response against it. So it takes your body, up to 2 weeks to build up the antibodies that can actually target the actual COVID-19 virus and the memory cells and those type of things. So that's why you're deemed fully vaccinated 2 weeks after the second dose. Anytime in between there, you're not fully vaccinated, and you could be still at risk for the complications of a COVID-19 infection. So the benefits of being fully vaccinated is, obviously I'm going to stress the health benefits. So the health benefits is, one, you don't get severely ill from COVID-19 infection. You don't get hospitalized, where we would have to put you on a ventilator. And being on a ventilator comes with its own risks and own problems, because usually people who go on ventilators don't tend to come off. The majority of people are usually extremely sick, and being on a ventilator is not a good thing. It's usually a last resort. And finally, you don't die. And that's what each and every vaccine so far has been proven to do against COVID-19 infection. And that's why it's important, at least that's why I stress individuals that educate yourselves in whatever way you can. Try to source the right information. Double check your information with reliable sources, and then you can make a decision based on that. I usually don't just go off of one source. If I see something said, I look at least 2 to 3 different sources that are saying the same thing, and I try to make it a reliable source as much as possible.
Now, in terms of fully vaccinated persons, do they have to wear a mask outdoors?
Yes, currently, yes. And there's a reason behind that. We don't have enough people who are not fully vaccinated. And even though we're fully vaccinated, we can still be carriers of the virus. Even though the virus may not make us sick, it may not cause us to be hospitalized or cause us to die. Other people can still, who are unvaccinated or not fully vaccinated, may be at risk for getting an infection, and then themselves can become severely sick, be hospitalized, or die. And it even shows that people with underlying conditions now are more risk for severe COVID-19 infection. So people with diabetes, people with high blood pressure, people who are suffering from obesity, and people who suffer from asthma are more at risk for severe infection from COVID-19. So you have to take that into consideration.
Yeah, there are some people that I met who are saying, look, I have all these underlying conditions, and that is the reason why I don't want to go and take the vaccine, because they think somehow that the vaccine is going to jeopardize those underlying conditions that they have.
Okay, so during the studies and during the research, they tested the vaccine on individuals with underlying conditions, with high blood pressure, with diabetes. So it's been proven safe in these underlying conditions. What I would say for any individual who has these conditions is make sure those conditions are well controlled. Reason being, if you're too fragile or you're too sickly from these conditions, which they can cause illnesses, you need to be checked up by a doctor to see if you would be fit to take the vaccine. Because any type of stress or insult to your body can push you over the edge if you're too sickly.
I think that there are some persons who have a genuine fear of taking the vaccines, and these persons, what would you recommend for them? Maybe some sort of a counseling, or maybe some...
Well, I think different people need different things. I wish it was one shoe fits all. It would make everything a lot easier. But I think the key thing, even when I practiced counseling during my medical degree, you have to actually figure out what is the reason why this person, or what's the actual fear. They may tell you one thing,
yes,
but then you might find out it's something completely different. So it's important to engage with individuals about their actual concerns, because they'll finally open up to you about what their real concern is, and then hopefully you'll be able to alleviate that once you have an actual conversation with them, whatever the fear may be. Some people are just simply afraid of needles, and that's actually a big fear when it comes to taking vaccines. Some people don't want to go for needles. Some people literally, whenever they have an injection of any sort, they pass out. And that's just because of the anxiety. The anxiety causes a drop in the blood pressure, and then they pass out and they faint.
So it's psychosomatic, as they will say.
Yes.
Mind-body problem.
Yeah, so that happens to people a lot. And I actually saw a case where it happened to someone and they said, oh, it was the vaccine. But no, it wasn't the vaccine, because they eventually got right back up and they were fine. But it was just because of the anxiety of whether it was a needle or the anxiety of taking something new. But they got back up and they were fine.
Right. Now, we've had vaccines from the Serum Institute, made, of course, in India. And the last batch of vaccines that we had, we were told that they were from South Korea. Now, there's something going around in society. People are asking, I had the first one, which was from the Serum Institute in India. Is that the very same one that I'm getting, or I'm going to get the one from South Korea, and are they the same vaccines? Okay,
so they're the same vaccines. It's basically just a different manufacturer producing the same vaccines. So if you think about it like this, we have Coca-Cola here in St. Kitts. It's produced by the bottling company. They have Coca-Cola in America. It's the same ingredients they're using to produce it. It's the same thing. So it's the same vaccine.
Right. Now, Dr. Sebastian, what do you think has been one of the biggest health challenges posed to the Caribbean by this pandemic?
The biggest challenges? Well, one, I believe we face a logistics challenge. When I say logistics, I mean we don't necessarily have the infrastructure to house certain vaccines. So we have been limited by sourcing just one vaccine. And luckily enough, in St. Kitts and Nevis, we seem to be fine with sourcing this vaccine, but other countries around the Caribbean, they're not so lucky. And it could be due to our smaller population size, so we're I guess allowed to get enough vaccines there in to meet the demands of our population. I think that's been one of the biggest concerns, and also that we don't have the facilities, the health facilities, to manage mass vaccination. This has never been an issue for us in the Caribbean, where we needed to vaccinate an entire population all at once, or near and close to an entire population all at once. So that is probably the biggest hurdles. For instance, we can't really facilitate Pfizer and Moderna, and Pfizer and Moderna have said it themselves. We don't foresee our vaccines really being used in certain countries or areas because of how it's made. It needs to be stored in -70 to -30 degrees Celsius for it to actually be viable and for it to work. Otherwise, they expect to see a lot of waste. And that's another challenge there. We just don't have the infrastructure and we don't have the facilities so that we can take advantage of everything that the world has to offer for this pandemic. But luckily enough, we have something that works here, and we have enough of something that works here. And I think we should take advantage of that. That's my opinion. We definitely should, because, I mean, currently the EU is suing AstraZeneca because it doesn't have enough vaccines from it. So that goes to show you how important these vaccines are to these countries, even the countries that wanted to, basically stop or halt it for a reason.
Right. No, there's a concern now about vaccine shortages, especially with what is basically happening in India at the moment. And, the Serum Institute, from what I understand, is the largest producer of vaccines in the world.
Yes.
And now that is being affected because of what is actually taking place in India. And of course, India is going to need all the vaccines that they can get.
Yes.
And that possibly may affect the number of vaccines for the rest of the world, at least for a time. And now you spoke about the EU suing AstraZeneca for not really coming up with what they promised.
Yes.
In terms of the production of the number of vaccines that was in the contract. Now, there are other vaccines that are being used in the Caribbean.
Yes.
Because I know that in Dominican Republic they're using Novax. Now, Novax is from China. And you also have the vaccine Sputnik from Russia.
Yes.
That is also being used in the Caribbean. Do those vaccines require the same sort of cold storage facilities? And if not, with a vaccine shortage, why are these vaccines not being approved? And they're using them.
Yes.
Have they been approved by the World Health Organization?
Well, these vaccines, those vaccines that you mentioned, they can be used in these countries based on they don't need that ultra cold storage like the Pfizer and Moderna, because they're not mRNA vaccines. So mRNA vaccines require this because mRNA itself, which is messenger RNA, which basically sends a message to your cells to produce the COVID-19 proteins, so your body can respond to it and build up a natural defense against it. So this is so they can be used in this region because they don't require that. And why haven't they?
They are being used.
And they are being used. Why haven't they been approved by the World Health Organization? I don't know if they've met necessarily the requirements for the World Health Organization to approve them, or I don't know if they've actually applied for approval, because there's two different things. You have to apply for approval, or at least send in your data or research to get approved by these organizations to actually be approved. Unfortunately, I'm not privy to the knowledge if they actually applied for it, or the criteria which, if they did, the criteria at which they...
And you don't know, but the reason why I asked that question is because the world is moving towards vaccine passport. And if these vaccines, even though they are being used, it means that people are being vaccinated with them in the Caribbean. And if only those vaccines that have been approved by the World Health Organization, namely the Oxford AstraZeneca,
Yes.
the Pfizer BioNTech, the Moderna, the Johnson & Johnson, if these have been the only vaccines that have been approved, does this put those persons at a disadvantage who would have been fully vaccinated by the Novavax and the Sputnik vaccines, albeit they be from China and Russia? Would they be their vaccine passports be approved by the rest of the world?
Well, I can give you an example. For instance, the AstraZeneca has not been approved in the USA as yet.
No.
But they have run their trials in the US on the AstraZeneca, and their trials have said, okay, it's a safe and effective vaccine, but still the FDA hasn't approved it. So
is that because they are requiring more data? Because since this vaccine has been rolled out,
Yes.
the AstraZeneca vaccine, they have months and months of data that they can actually provide to the Food and Drug Administration in the United States for them to look at this data. And if the data is basically good data and whatever, they can approve.
Yes. So AstraZeneca is actually looking to seek approval within the next few weeks, from the last I heard. So it may be just a matter of time until they get approval from the FDA. But it's important to understand that even though it may not be approved by everybody, it doesn't necessarily mean that these vaccines don't work, regarding the Novavax, etc., because they would have done their own research, their own clinical trials, etc., which would have shown that they are effective. But having a body, an unbiased body, to approve it for the use in the general population, it adds, I guess, a level of approval, well, not approval, but what word am I looking for? Safety to it. You know, like, they did their research, we looked at their research, we approve of this, it's safe and effective to use. So that's what it does. So because you don't have an approval, like in the case of the AstraZeneca in the USA, doesn't mean that the AstraZeneca isn't working, because clearly it's working in all these other countries.
Well, the US has storage of AstraZeneca that it has been sending to other countries, really.
Yes.
Because they've already
approved.
bought, but it has not approved, so it means that they cannot use it there.
Yes, that's all it means.
Now, you took a Hippocratic oath,
Yes,
and to act basically in the best interests of your clients.
yes,
Additionally, in your profession, there is a fiduciary responsibility as well to act in the best interests of your clients. I have seen where medical professionals, some doctors, and even nurses have been very negative about the vaccine. They don't want to take it. And not only do they don't want to take it, but they're not keeping that information to themselves as their personal decision, but they're putting it out there. What do you have to say about that?
Well, people in certain, I guess, professions, or certain, I guess, I hate to call it authorities, but when you're, I guess, a model in health, for example, whether you're a doctor, people are going to definitely take your word as gospel, because that's what you studied, that's your profession, for the most part. So when you speak on such a platform as health, you have to be very careful with what you say, especially if you say things that you may not be fully aware of or fully, read in. So doctors and nurses, they're humans. Okay, we're all humans. Some doctors and some nurses, they make sure they have all their checks in balance before they make a decision or they decide to speak out. Some of them come from a more emotional standpoint and they speak based on that. And I believe personally, this is my opinion, as a doctor, I like to make sure I have all the information necessary before I speak or I make any type of claim. So I know there's a lot of doctors making certain claims that they're against vaccines and nurses, but disagreements in the medical community has always existed regarding everything. All forms of treatment, there's always a debate going on. The only difference is now it's definitely more publicized because COVID-19 is a huge platform that people can speak on.
But how can you go against, as a medical profession, how can you actually go against the science that you would have studied? Isn't that something sort of a betrayal to what you would have studied?
It's a bit of a betrayal, but I would also say that every doctor will approach things a certain way, and every doctor doesn't necessarily have the same base knowledge as a certain doctor may have, or an ability to understand certain things, because they're humans. You know, we're not a conveyor belt where we're offloaded and we all have the same level of information from medical school or from practicing in general. You're basically exposed, your knowledge as a doctor, at least what my father said, is based on how much exposure you have to information and knowledge. Mm-hmm. So the more you're exposed to information and knowledge, the more you expose yourself to information and knowledge, and the more you practice, the better of a doctor you are. So yes, I can be a doctor for 20 years, but a doctor who's only been a doctor for 10 years can immerse themselves in way more information than I ever did in the 20 years.
But you spoke earlier on about that might be the emotion of certain health practitioners, but they are not supposed to be making decisions on emotion. That is not science.
No,
that is more an area of psychology, but not science, because I mean science doesn't really deal so much with emotion. Science deals with observations and facts and coming to conclusions based on an inductive approach.
Yes. So yes, making an emotional decision as a doctor, it can be detrimental in some cases. Some cases it works out fine, but I do believe that emotion should play a part in medicine. It should play, not necessarily in the science itself, but when you speak to people.
Certainly, the psychology.
You have to be able to speak and communicate to people and help them understand from the scientific perspective in order to relay that information towards them. But when I'm looking at actual data itself, that's science itself, and this is what science tells me, because what science does is try to eliminate all possible factors, and so we can come to the best conclusion possible, and that's what science does.
Yeah, Dr. Sebastian, never before are we seeing, though, this distrust in science. There seems to be this distrust in science, and we're seeing it with this pandemic, and we're hearing people speak about all kinds of remedies and all kinds of things that are not really scientifically approved.
No, it's not necessarily scientifically approved. Yes, I've heard of so many remedies. It's every time I speak, it's a new remedy, and I'm not saying that certain remedies or certain herbal medications and stuff, they don't work, because some of them actually do. Some of them actually having compounds that actually work towards certain things, and those have actually been studied by science to say, yeah, this can work. But the only difference is when you take herbal remedies, you don't know if you're taking enough of a dose of something to help you. With science, we're able to actually see, okay, how much of this do you need to produce an effect? That's why we need 2 doses of this vaccine to produce a certain level of immunity that can, be effective in, stopping the pandemic.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So that's what science does. There's also side effects of taking herbal medication. You don't know what these side effects can be. Currently, there is this drug, ivermectin, I believe. They're saying that could be used to treat COVID-19, and they want to know why it hasn't been approved. Well, one, there's some serious side effects for ivermectin, and I think some individuals ended up dead because they took too much of it, because it was never designed for COVID-19. So you have to be careful until enough studies have been actually done on it to actually even bother to consider treating people with that. Mm-hmm. Because you don't know, because we've never treated this illness with this medication.
Mm-hmm. Are there some people who should never take a vaccine? Are there persons who just should never take a vaccine? I know that presently AstraZeneca is not being administered to persons under 18 years old. Why?
Well, that's simply because the studies didn't do research on the vaccines on people 18 and on, below 18. Mm-hmm. That's the only reason. Currently, all the makers of the vaccines are doing trials to see if they can administer the vaccine in people under the age of 18.
Will it have to be like a smaller dose? For example, you have the aspirin for adults, and then they speak about baby aspirin. Will it have to be a lower dose? All of that is in the trial?
Well, it could possibly be included in the trial, but I don't think a lower dose would be necessary. But they would definitely look at that in the trial, whether or not they need the same dose, or maybe it's a half a dose, and it produces a certain response. Mm-hmm. They usually look at all these things in the trial. Okay. Even in the original trial, they looked at half doses, etc. Mm-hmm. So it's still left up to the trial to decide which is the most effective dosage for that age group. Right. I think Pfizer is actually looking at vaccinating
2 to 12-year-olds.
2 to 12-year-olds now.
Mm-hmm.
2 to 11-year-olds, mm-hmm. because they're waiting on the FDA approval from 12 to 12-year-olds and out.
They're already giving it to 16-year-olds.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Now, is it okay to take an over-the-counter pain medication before or after getting the COVID-19 vaccine? There are some people who would have said, before I go and get the vaccine, I need to take the paracetamol. I've heard that.
I don't foresee that actually causing much problems in reality. It's not recommended because in science, taking things like ibuprofen and stuff like that can hinder the immune response. And we want the immune system to respond to the vaccine to build up a natural defense. But in practice, I wouldn't see it causing much of a problem. If I were the person, I would honestly wait until after taking the vaccine just to be sure. Yes. To take paracetamol or something. Right.
Like that. But is ibuprofen recommended or acetaminophen?
It's acetaminophen recommended.
Acetaminophen.
Yeah.
Acetaminophen is recommended.
Yes.
Not ibuprofen.
Not ibuprofen. Mm-hmm. Because ibuprofen deals with the immune system and it's an anti-inflammatory. Mm-hmm. So if it's an anti-inflammatory, it hinders the immune system.
What about people who are alcoholics and who drink on a daily basis? They have to have their alcoholic boost. Mm-hmm. With them taking the vaccine, is there any sort of a reaction from the alcohol with the vaccine?
Well, not with the alcohol itself, but alcohol actually hinders your immune system as well. And then plus, if you're a chronic alcoholic, you may have some issues underlying because of that chronic alcohol intake. You can have liver disease, you can have kidney issues, you can have heart issues with chronic intake of alcohol. So if you are a chronic alcoholic, I would suggest stop if you can. It's not easy to stop something that you may be addicted to.
Right.
Then I would get evaluated on my current health status.
Yes.
Because you don't know, because alcohol is probably one of the worst things you can give to yourself that's legal. You know, in a chronic state, because it damages every part of your body. There's no organ that's safe.
I met somebody the other day who told me that weed, marijuana, or ganja, whatever you want to call it, is their vaccine. But at the very same time, we're hearing that smoking is not very good for your respiratory system. It's not very good for your lungs.
Okay.
Now, what does COVID-19 do to your respiratory system?
Okay, so what COVID-19 does to your respiratory system is it can cause lung scarring. And when I say lung scarring, it basically kills the tissue or destroys the tissue in the lungs through whether it's inflammation, the actual infection. So it becomes scar tissue. So if you ever had a scab after a cut, think of your lungs kind of like that. Obviously, if you have that kind of scar tissue, your lungs need to expand and contract. It won't be able to do that anymore, and that's where you get the difficulty breathing. So that's what COVID-19 does to your lungs, effectively.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
There's something called long COVID, because I've heard that even long after you would have been deemed COVID-19 negative,
Yes.
that there are still lingering effects of the COVID,
Sadly.
and some people still have breathing problems, even for men.
Yeah.
They say that some men, suffer with erectile dysfunction.
Yes.
I don't think any man wants to suffer with that.
Yes, COVID-19 some men have come out with, has released to the public that they're having problems ever since getting COVID-19, the infection, that they're having problems performing in bed due to this. So long COVID is basically the effects of a COVID-19 infection after you've recovered. So the time varies on when you get this, but it seems to be a couple weeks to maybe a month or two that or maybe you just never get over these symptoms, whether it's difficulty breathing due to the lung scarring. It could be brain fog. Brain fog is where you have difficulty thinking or expressing yourself, or perhaps remembering something very basic, whether it is, where do I put my keys again, or something like that, something that you should know. That's a brain fog. They're finding people with heart disease because of COVID-19. I actually have a very close friend who's suffering from that in the UK, where they're in their 20s, no illnesses, and they have a heart functioning like a 60-year-old. So that's very terrifying to me. A young, healthy individual who's suffering from that, and plus they're female, and females don't tend to have as many heart issues as males, because females tend to take care of themselves better, and just their genetic makeup, their estrogen protects them from heart issues before menopause. So
why do children seem to deal better with the COVID-19 than adults?
Well, I would say because children just tend to bounce back from diseases and illnesses a lot better than adults. And I've thought of a few theories myself. I haven't found anything concrete. It's just that children are still developing, and so their bodies and immune systems seem to be a little bit more adaptable to things than adults. So that's one of my theories. I'm not saying that it's actual fact, but children just do better when it comes to illnesses. When children have surgeries, they do better than when adults have the same surgery. They bounce back faster, and I guess it's a testament to their youth and the adaptability their bodies have at that stage, because they're still growing, and developing.
Dr. Sebastian, we're going to go to the phone lines, and to hear what people have to say. The local numbers to call are 465-2555, 465-2555, and the international number is 1718-577-2916. That is 1718-577-2916. We await your calls. Right. Now, pregnant or breastfeeding women, can they get the vaccine?
The studies say they can, but in St. Kitts and Nevis, we have not offered that to breastfeeding and pregnant women.
Right.
Just because we're waiting on more information
Yes.
regarding that, because pregnant individuals and breastfeeding individuals, they're like the holy grail of medicine. We don't test medication on them. If we can avoid testing medication on them or vaccines or anything like that, we just, so the research hasn't been done on them, basically.
Okay.
It's been only been done on non-pregnant women and non-breastfeeding women. So that's why there's no information on it. So we're not going to do it yet.
Okay.
But studies have said that they can.
Okay. Is there anyone who should not get a COVID-19 vaccine?
Someone who is severely ill. Someone who is severely ill, that can only really be determined by their doctor, whether or not they're well enough to take this vaccine or not. But so I suggest people...
We have a call. Working for you, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Yes, and good afternoon to the doctor there.
Good afternoon.
Very experienced doctor. Doctor, I just called to congratulate you in the experience that you're putting out there. Nothing to condemn you about.
Thank you.
Everything sounding good. But I hear you mention something about needle. When I take the vaccine, I prefer to take the vaccine needle and to take a blood test needle. When you're going to take a surgery. Them are the two hardest injection you take. But this one with the vaccine, me I feel nothing.
No, it's smart. It's a tiny, tiny thing.
Yeah. And when I go for a blood test, when I see the nurse, I get the needle ready. I don't start to feel pain.
No, it's a bigger needle when...
And the needle, no got it we had yet. She only get it ready. And I don't feel pain.
Yeah.
So you see what my thing could do?
Yeah.
Okay, doctor.
All right, take care.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for calling in.
We have another caller. Working for you, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Mr. Williams, and good afternoon, Dr. Sebastian.
Hi, good
Yes,
afternoon.
I'm calling from New York. I had my 2 vaccines. I'm already vaccinated.
Great.
But with the first dose, I had, well, the next day my arm was sore, very sore.
Yes.
And then the same day and the next day, I was like, I had so much energy, like I could have moved do like a household of work, and I could have moved a whole house. But with the second one now, I had like a heavy head. It was like a heavy head, and then my heart rate was like going so fast, like I think it was 145. But then I think a day or two after, it went right back to normal.
That's
and
good.
people were saying that what people were saying that once you have a reaction, because you had the COVID disease. But I never had it before. Never had COVID at all. When I did my test, they said I never had COVID or anything. So what is that? Why is that?
Well, it's just a side effect of the vaccines. So even though you got hardly any effects from the first one, it doesn't mean you can't get side effects from the second one. For instance, the first vaccine, I got some body aches and some pains, and it wasn't bad. I can still do my work. But the second vaccine, I didn't get any side effects at all. I just got some arm pain by the needle site, and that was it. Some other people may have had the reverse, where in the first one they got no side effects, and the second one they got side effects, and that just shows that your immune system is working. And even though you may not get those side effects or symptoms, it doesn't mean it's not working, but it's nothing to be too concerned about. Thank you for calling in.
Yes. Working for you, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, wonderful program, gentlemen.
Thank you.
How are you guys doing?
Doing well, thank you.
Okay, that lady, the caller just now, she started to ask my question. I was about to ask. I heard people saying the second dose is stronger, like it has more effects. So I was about to ask, why is it so? Because I've had my first.
Yeah.
My second is coming up on the 20th, but I just want to make sure that,
Well, so
I listen. Okay.
theoretically, it should be a stronger response, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it will be. So it's just more of a likelihood that it will be a stronger response because your body is already primed to react to it. So that's why we would expect there is, but not necessarily, because I think I've had a less severe response the second time around. Actually feel normal, like nothing has actually, I've had no side effects from this except the needle in the arm, and that's it. So you may get no response, you may not get any side effects at all. You may still get some side effects. You may get some new ones that you didn't get before, but you will be, on your way to full vaccination.
Working for you, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Mr. Williams.
Good afternoon, sir.
And good afternoon to Dr. Sebastian dear.
Good afternoon.
I want to thank you to update the Federation on this vaccine outbreak, because there's a lot of negative thing going on out there on social media.
Yeah.
And some people on the road, men all was thinking funny, because when you don't take that and you hear all kind of negative thing, all kind of negative talk, it make you want to break it down. Talk about the vaccine getting chipped, getting this, and you only going to live a certain amount of years, and all kind of nonsense. But I'm glad that you come on this media, because here it's from different radio talk show, to clarify these things first, because that is why a lot of people is ain't going to take the vaccine, because the negative thing out there spreading. Almost every minute somebody sends some kind of negative thing to me, from overseas, from different things. Where the vaccine gonna do, where the vaccine gonna not do, where you gonna, and it's terrible. And for it to get the immunity, open up our country, I believe that is a good thing, because we don't have no community spread, we don't have no outbreak here, and I want to commend the Prime Minister and the task force and his cabinet. They're doing a wonderful job. And Mr. Williams, you're doing a wonderful job asking them questions too.
Thank
you.
You
are wonderful. May God bless you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Okay. No caller? Right. Good. Now Dr. Sebastian,
yeah.
Should I get the COVID-19 vaccine, even if I've already had COVID-19?
Yes. And those are that's the reason, because of what we spoke about before.
But antibodies, I would have developed antibodies
yes.
if I got the COVID-19 disease.
Yes, you would have. But unfortunately, those antibodies that you developed fighting the actual disease aren't as strong as the ones that you would get from the vaccine. And the reason being is that your body was fighting, so it didn't produce, I guess, a strong enough immune response against it, for whatever reason. And what it shows is the COVID-19 vaccines have a longer lasting immunity, but also once you get the COVID-19 vaccine, it protects you from the complications of long COVID, like we previously mentioned, whether it's the brain fog, the heart disease, the lung scarring, there's chronic fatigue, there's chronic body pain, and there's also, from the COVID-19 infection, increased risk of blood clots.
Yes.
Right.
We have a caller.
We have a caller.
Working for you, good afternoon.
Hello, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Very good afternoon.
Concern, if I understood right. I had the first vaccine. I didn't have no symptoms at all. Nothing whatsoever. Go home, did my work as usual, and nothing. But if I understand, you said the second vaccine, which I have to go for on the 20th, It may cause problem. That is what we want to know.
Okay, so no, not necessarily. I'm just saying there is a possibility that you may get a side effect from the second vaccine. It's a possibility that you would have gotten a side effect from the first vaccine and then didn't get a side effect from the second vaccine. So it's just really up to, I guess, your body's response to the vaccine at that time. But just to ease your mind, any symptoms or side effects don't last very long. It's usually, it can last from a couple of hours to 48 hours. And usually it's gone by then, and you can take medication to, put yourself in a more comfortable situation during that time. Whether you have a headache or a fever, you can take paracetamol. If you're feeling nauseous, you can take Gravol, or any type of symptom you have. There's medication there that can, help you feel more comfortable during that time.
Working for you, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Yeah, I don't congratulate the doctor already.
Oh.
We are the first caller. But
Okay.
I forget to ask a question. With the Cuban vaccine, what they're waiting on? I never remember one time that the Prime Minister said he's going to get vaccine from Cuba.
Well, the Cuban vaccine hasn't finished its clinical trials and research. So until there's data available, no other country can actually make a decision, and until Cuba actually offers it to the rest of the world, because they're going to vaccinate their population first and foremost. They're going to make sure their home base is safe, and then they're going to look towards the outer world. So once that data is available, I'm sure like any authority around the world, St. Kitts would look at its options, and then that could be possibly a consideration if it makes sense for us here.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I hope that answers the question, sir.
Yes.
Yeah. So in Brazil
Mm-hmm.
and India,
Yeah.
they're the two champions in the world now.
Yeah, with the COVID-19 cases.
Well, I don't know if you want to refer to them as champions.
Because Brazil, Rio de Janeiro, they're burying people on the beach now.
Oh, that's horrible.
I see them, but not with a coffin, you just wrap them in something.
That's horrible.
Yeah, it's very horrible, and that is what once countries are still experiencing this resurgence in the virus, and it's still causing so much death and suffering. There's a saying, when your neighbor's house is on fire, you wet your own. And the very fact is, because we have not had any deaths here from the virus, and we've only had not even 50 cases yet from the of confirmed cases, that does not mean that we must be complacent. It also does not mean that we must rest on our laurels and think that all is well, because that is what the vaccine is there for. Because in the event that anything happens here, people are vaccinated, and it will be better for you, because then you won't have to be hospitalized, and your immune system will have the response really to deal with the virus. We cannot become complacent, and we cannot buy into all of the negativity, the misinformation, and the disinformation, because we are looking at what is happening in the world. And what is happening in the world, who says that it cannot happen here? I mean, India is a huge country. I think it has over 1 billion people, the second most populated country in the world. But look at what is happening in the Caribbean. There's a resurgence in the Caribbean. Anguilla was one of the most successful models in the Caribbean. Look at what is happening to Anguilla, shut down. Look at what is happening in Trinidad. They now have one of the variants there in Trinidad. Trinidad shut down. Look at what has happened in Barbados.
Yeah.
So we cannot think that we are immune here, that somehow we are bionic, or that it cannot happen to us. And that is why the necessity of being vaccinated is so important. I am sure, Doctor, you would agree with me.
Yes, I agree. I always tell individuals, just look over at your neighbor. that could have been us if we never had such a stringent policy in terms of quarantine and those type of things happening in St. Kitts and Nevis. I think it's really due to that.
But even with the
there's some leaks.
Even with the stringent, because look at what has happened. We've had people who have smuggled in here. Remember, we've had some Haitians come in here on a boat and all of this, and we've had other people come in here and whatever. They can easily bring the virus in and transmit it, and then there'll be community spread. And we have porous borders.
I believe that's what happened to Anguilla. That's what, at least...
That is what happened to Anguilla.
And I'm not sure how sick these individuals are, but I can tell you, dealing with one patient in the hospital from quarantine as an emergency room physician on the COVID-19 unit, just to initially see them when they first come in, it takes hours just to deal with one patient. That suiting up in your PPE, your protective equipment, making sure all the staff is aware, making sure if they need to go do an x-ray or a scan, that they're prepared to take that patient and to transport that patient from the emergency room to the x-ray department or whichever department needs to go. Everyone has to be informed. The hallways should be cleared and everything has to be clean and sanitized afterwards.
Mm-hmm. So it's a lot. It's a tremendous toll.
It's a tremendous
on
effort.
The resources and efforts.
Yes, and when I finish using this PPE, I throw it in the garbage, and because I can't use it anymore. You know, it has to be.
And can you imagine what these countries are basically going through? And even though we're in solidarity with them, we cannot afford to be like the foolish bridesmaid, to use a biblical term. We have to have our oil for our lamps. And not wait until something happens. You try to run out to buy oil. It will sort of be too late. Or we can't be like it's Noah and the ark. People were getting all this warning, and when the flood actually came, who was outside the ark had to drown.
I've always believed in preparation, and I think this vaccine gives us a good shot at preparing for what will inevitably happen. COVID-19 will eventually reach to St. Kitts' shores. It will eventually, because we can't stay locked in forever.
And we are talking here, for example, tourism is saying that they're going to have a boat coming here in July, Seabourn. You know, working for you. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon again, Mr. Williams.
Yes.
And good afternoon again, Dr. Sebastian. I just wanted to clarify something for me out there on the road.
No problem.
Because up to this morning, someone called me and tell me that the vaccine made in India, and how come India full of corona?
You know,
that's so I just wanted to clarify that for me, let them know that.
That's actually a
because
very
I'm trying to tell them that the vaccine, again, India really make the vaccine. It's a company. A company from different parts of England and Europe, right, make the vaccine in India, the company in India, based in India.
Yes.
So
okay.
they saying that the vaccine made in India and India was with corona. So I just want to clarify that and clear it up for me.
Okay, no problem. So that's a very, very, very good question and statement. So yes, so it's the Oxford AstraZeneca. They're the ones that owns the vaccine, okay? And
they have the trademark.
They have the trademark. And basically, they, I guess, contract certain institutes to create it for them. So the Serum Institute of India is just a contracted institute, a vaccine manufacturer to produce it for them. So that's all it is. So they don't own the rights to make a contract or a deal with, let's say, countries or anything like that. So it would have been up to the, I guess, the Indian officials or health or government to make these contracts for its people.
Yeah,
so you were correct with saying that, yes, it's not one and the same. So you were correct, sir.
Yes, and do you know the head of AstraZeneca has really been under fire
Yeah.
for really not delivering. And in fact, I think he had to go to England and so on because he was threatened. But I think he went back to India. But that was, a story that they had in The Economist. So there's enormous pressure
Yeah.
being placed on the Serum Institute to produce vaccines. But now with the India situation, it means then the vaccines that they're producing will be for the have to vaccinate the Indian people, and how do they provide on to the rest of the world?
They have to definitely put aside vaccines for India because
Yes.
If India is in turmoil, then how can the Serum Institute of India help the rest of the world?
That is correct.
Yeah.
Well, Doctor, we are basically out of time. And is there anything that you would like to say to the people of St. Kitts and Nevis with respect to the COVID-19 pandemic in general and the COVID-19 AstraZeneca vaccine in particular?
Okay, so the COVID-19 pandemic, it is very real. People around the world are suffering. Unfortunately, and I say unfortunately because I wish I never knew anyone personally that had to deal with COVID-19 themselves. I know someone that has actually passed away from COVID-19. That is very real. And we're lucky enough in St. Kitts and Nevis that we have never had to face that reality like other countries have. But other countries are facing that reality, and it can possibly become our reality if we don't at least try to educate ourselves and look for the right information so we can properly make a decision as to whether or not we're going to choose to get vaccinated. And hopefully I have said the pros of vaccination, and hopefully that can resonate with individuals right now to get vaccinated. If not, that's fine, but I at least hope that I at least triggered individuals to do a little bit more research, or at least question some of the negative things that they may have heard, and do a little bit more research on them, and hopefully they can come to a better conclusion to what they think about the vaccine.
Yes, and do you know that, Dr. Sebastian, that there's a shortage of vaccines worldwide?
Yes, there is.
There are people who want vaccines and who somehow are not able to access these vaccines.
Canada for one.
Yes. And we have vaccines here in St. Kitts and Nevis. And what? We're refusing vaccines that people well want. That is the calamity of the whole situation. And what is going to happen? These vaccines will spoil. And when they spoil, it's a loss of money. A loss of money really at a time when the country does not have all these financial resources.
I don't think many countries have any financial resources.
Precisely.
It's a really a tough world to live in right now.
And how do we get back to normal? The only way we can get back to normal is through vaccination, or some semblance of it.
Well, I think this is my personal opinion. Again, this is not scientifically based. I'm throwing that disclaimer out there. That normal will take a very long time to come about.
It will be a new normal.
It'll be a new normal, but getting even closer to that old normal, it's going to take some time. And I believe, in my opinion, that first protecting ourselves against COVID-19 is the beginning of the journey towards that new normal. So that's my take on getting back to normalcy, is the vaccines, and educating ourselves about COVID-19 in general, and that's my take.
On that note, Dr. Sebastian, we leave it here for today. I want to thank you so much for coming and helping in this education process, this education campaign on the vaccine, which is so important to sort of clear up a lot of the misconceptions, the misinformation that is out there and the disinformation. So I want to eternally thank you for coming and taking some time out of your busy schedule. I know you have a very busy schedule. You have to leave right after. And thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Okay. You have been listening to another edition of Working for You. My guest for today was Dr. Cuthbert Sebastian Jr., and he is an emergency room physician at the Joseph N. France General Hospital. We thank him very much for coming today and sharing with us. I also want to thank all of our listeners to today's program and all of our callers to today's program. We continue to appreciate you being with us, listening to this program from week to week. Next week, we will be back with another edition of Working for You. Until then, I am Lesroy Williams. Take good care.